University and Lancaster University, Paul Ashman, how they sort of laid the foundation of institutional structures and pedagogy and curriculum, and how each of these contribute towards holistic student development. Session, as we went on to session 3, and as you can see, there were 470 plus, and the participants are maintained throughout in very large numbers. In the third session, Maha and Tom, Maha from American University, Cairo. Many of her probably know her. She's an international name for many things that she does at an international level. From American University, Cairo, and Tom Lowe from the University of Westminster. Mahabali talked about the approaches of inclusive pedagogies and socially just care and critical consciousness she weaved into her talk about teaching practices, while Tom concentrated on student engagement within how to bring about inclusive student engagement and transformative learning as an end result. The session was instrumental in showing how to design learning spaces that are dynamic, compassionate, and equitable, where all students thrive. In the next fourth session, which we finished on Friday, it was another very, very remarkable session, much liked. It was a campus community engagement for impact. And as I said before, our focus is not just academic success. It is students' whole success of a student beyond the campus walls. And so this session, Diane talked about from the University of Witwatersrand, talked about networking of people, where she demonstrated with real examples how actual people can break their silos in which they function to come together. It was very, very powerful talk. And then, of course, Noor Jamal from University of Central Asia talked about what her campus was doing to work on civic engagement and service learning and global citizenship. And she talked about a lot of programs where students were engaged in multiple forms of activity, civic engagement and social learning activities, really service learning. And so, service learning was component, but going out into the field was the main focus. So before I go any further to what is happening today, I would like to introduce, oh yes, sorry. Before I even go further, now this is the basis for our framework of the series. We found this from Loden et al. And as you can see that this diversity wheel, that is the framework for our series, shows very clearly the complexity of addressing diversity. It talks about, I think, 1, 2, 3, 5 levels at which diversity factors work. And within each level, there is a whole list of elements that contribute and then matter and then contributes towards that one single layer that you see over here. And if you see these elements that I call are like 23 in number. And for me, it is not just barely a combination of 23 by 6 layers. It is how each element can have a variance from person to person in terms of intensity and scope, which will bring up a unique person every time with unique, diverse characteristics. And that, I think, is the challenge when we are dealing with diversity and trying to counter it. How do we consider the multi-layered, multifold elements, and within that matrix, multiple permutations that happen, and how we can deal with that? And that is a tough call. That's why, it's challenging to bring about inclusion, but it's something that you keep on trying. So here I'll introduce my team, and I think the team that has made it possible. So Fatma is the educational developer. And then please wave Fatma so everybody knows. And then, of course, there is Gohar, who is our manager and who is responsible for the logistics. And so, Gohar, there you are. And a deputy head who works with me is a postdoc Fulbright scholar, brilliant, who is our tech expert, instructional designer, and AI expert right now. And I don't know where, oh, Mavis, she's on her way to get her daughter from school. So she's in the car. So,
yes.
Yes, lovely to see
Hi,
you.
everyone.
Yes. So this is the team that worked to make this possible. So, Fatima, over to you for the netiquettes.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last webinar of these professional development series. Before we begin, I'm going to quickly run you through the netiquettes for today's session. Before we begin, please make sure that your Zoom display name includes your university name followed by your full name. This will help us ensure your attendance for certification. Please follow the format given on the screen. You will be muted during the session. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat. Please note that a minimum of 75% of participation is mandatory for certification. And lastly, the session is being recorded and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. Over to you, Dr. Afsana.
So, agenda for today, as you can see, is we are talking about accountability and how leadership is made accountable in an inclusive environment. It's also talks about principles of distributive and procedural justice to promote fairness in organizational practices. We also will learn how to identify and address barriers that limit human potential and inclusivity within educational environments. We'll talk about how digital pedagogies can promote and measure inclusive teaching. And we will also learn how to create data-driven frameworks to ensure sustainable, meaningful impact and change. And of course, all this is for justice and equality and how to promote it on a global scale. Let me first go to our first lead of this session, uh, is Qudsia Kalsoom. She is from the University of Dundee, United Kingdom. She's a lecturer in education, teaching and research. But she has a doctoral research focused on education for sustainable development in teacher education. And both are much needed wherever you want to bring about change. Both sustainability and teacher professional development are areas that keep coming up. Since 2015, she has studied environmental education and education for sustainable development pedagogies, the relationship between critical thinking dispositions and environmental concerns, pre-service teachers agency, and how to enact education for sustainable development and pre-service teachers' conceptions of ESD. Her transdisciplinary research spans multiple SDGs, including quality education, gender equality, reduced inequalities, responsible production, consumption, and climate change. And so they're quite among the 12. I think you're very busy with four of them, I think, if I'm not wrong. And you have experience in designing transformative research projects aimed at empowering marginalized groups, especially women. And I think we'll say over to you. And then, of course, we'll come to our last but not the least speaker, who is exceptional in her own way, Diana Laurillard. But I'll introduce her later when the time comes. Ji.
Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Rukhsana Zia for the kind introduction and providing me an opportunity to share my insights with you. It's a great honor and privilege to be part of this distinguished webinar series. So thank you very much. So before I start my talk on institutional justice, I would like to clarify my scholarly positioning. As Ruxana already mentioned, that like we are not going to talk about the tension between corporate world agenda and academia. We all know that there is always a debate, ongoing debate about whether educational institutions are shaped by the wider society or if the society is shaped by education. So while I do not dismiss the first perspective, I believe that education has great transformative potential. So the underlying assumption of my research and teaching is that socially critical education can lead to societal transformation. I argue that inclusive and just institutional culture is the key element of socially critical educational practice. So, all my research, my teaching is underpinned by this assumption. As mentioned by Ruxana while she was discussing the wheel, the diversity wheel, so there are institutional factors, and these institutional factors align very closely to my talk that is on creating and promoting inclusive and just institutional culture. So give me a minute so that I can share my screen. Can you see my screen? Sorry. Great. All right. So, I don't know how. Okay. All right. Sorry, actually, I'm unable to. Okay. Now it's okay. Yeah. I was worried about the. Okay. So, I will be covering organizational justice, inclusion, key elements of inclusive and just culture, inclusive leadership and accountability. There are too many things which we can see on the slide, but actually, I will be able to cover them. I will just be talking about these things very briefly. So we know that educational institutions are social sites of constant interactions among students, teachers, non-teaching staff, management, community representatives, uh, parents. So this social site offers learning through formal as well as hidden curriculum. And institutional culture actually reflects the hidden curriculum of any organization. And in the UK, Universities UK has recommended that in order for institutions to become more inclusive, to BAME, that is Black and minority ethnicity students, they should aim to transform their cultures. And one way of doing this is by exploring their hidden curriculum. So when I talk about institutional culture, actually, I'm referring to the key element of hidden curriculum. Hidden curriculum is something which is not visible, but it actually shapes behaviors and dispositions of students and other stakeholders, whoever is involved in an organization. So, equity and justice. Sometimes we use word fairness, sometimes we use the word justice, and basically equality is an important basis for justice. Sometimes people use justice and equality synonymously, but there are people who use them differently. So, equality is an important basis for social justice, whereas justice in educational institution refers to fairness in the institution. So when we talk about fairness, it is about fairness of opportunities. It is about fairness of the outcomes, fairness in every single thing which is being done in an institution, whether it is related to assessment or it is related to speaking opportunities for the children to express their thoughts, or it is about promotion of staff members, like fairness in every single thing that involves whether students or other people, other stakeholders of the organization. So the question is, why do we need justice in educational institutions? Probably you have already answered this question in the previous webinars, but I'm just trying to put it probably in a different way. So we do need justice in educational institutions. What does research say about this? Organizational justice is positively related to organizational citizenship behavior. Our work is not like I'm working as a teacher and researcher in my organization, but my work is not limited to that, not only to teaching and research. I am part of the wider community of my university, and organizational citizenship behaviors, they are directly linked to organizational justice. My own behavior as a teacher and as a researcher depends on the wider institutional justice. My behavior is shaped by the just practices of my organization. So fair treatment from superiors encourages teachers to assist others. So assist others means collaborating with others, helping others. So if a teacher believes that the organization, the institution is providing just practices, is providing opportunities for just practices, and everything is just, then their treatment would be different. Their behavior towards other colleagues would be different. It would be more collaborative. So teachers who perceive fair treatment from the leadership perform even beyond the standard responsibilities specified in the employment contract. So actually, fairness is a process. Fairness is a phenomenon. It is an outlook too. In one of my studies, research, it was an international study where we collected data from Pakistan, New Zealand, the USA, Austria, and India. In that study, it focused on sustainability concerns. And we found that the outlook of justice, that is fair-mindedness, was a predictor of sustainability behaviors as well. So justice is extremely important. It does not only shape individuals' behaviors within the organization, where people start collaborating with others, they show more collaborative behaviors. It impacts their lifelong practices. It impacts their sustainability as well as environmental concerns. So sustainability as fair-mindedness is an essential, I would say, it is an essential outlook. It is not only a process, or it is not only a phenomenon, it is an outlook as well. So research further shows that even young children are sensitive to procedural justice. We will talk about the difference between distributive and procedural justice later. So the research shows that even young children are sensitive to procedural justice, and that experiences of both fairness and unfairness help shape young people's wider attitudes towards authority. And there is another research which says that students' trust in teachers, that is again procedural trust, predicts their behaviors in class. When we say that, well, students should be collaborating with each other, but if students know that there is injustice, students are not going to collaborate with each other. They will try to find some other means of getting something done instead of collaborating with others. They would be more involved in competing with others. There is another research that investigated the relations between organizational justice and academic engagement and academic burnout among Spanish students. They found the students who were treated fairly were more engaged with their studies and were also less burnout. It has an impact not only on the staff, but also on the students. Sometimes we just find people talking about some injustice within their organizations, but sometimes I feel that we forget that actually the impact of that injustice is on the students too. They also feel more burnout, just like staff. So there are two types of justice: distributed justice, distributive justice, and procedural justice. Distributive justice refers to fairness of the outcomes or rewards people receive. For example, employees receiving equal pay for equal work, promotions based on merit, students receiving grades that correctly reflect their learning. So it is all about outcomes, that whether they are related to rewards in terms of promotion, or it is about salary, or it is about students' grades. So if distributive justice means that everything is, there are policies for equal, for justice. And for example, if someone is working in a certain grade level, say grade 18 or 17, so whoever is working in that level, there would be certain spine points. So there is, the people are getting equal pay for their work, regardless of their ethnicity, their social class, their religious beliefs, their gender or disability. So if they are working at, their pay scale falls under certain spine point, then they should be getting the same pay. There shouldn't be any discrimination on the basis of that. So similarly, promotion policies and when it comes to students' grades, they should be fair. On the other hand, procedural justice refers to the fundamental rules and procedural arrangements that should be followed in the formulation and implementation of laws, regulations, rules, and any other policies. It is said that if there is no procedural justice, we cannot achieve distributive justice. And research, which I already mentioned, shared with you, related to students' burnout and students' satisfaction, that also talks about procedural justice. So procedural justice is about the procedural arrangements. And social justice, I'm sure we are all familiar with the concept of social justice education. So what does social justice education refers to? It talks about procedural justice. So social justice can be can be embodied in procedural justice in two ways. First, the rationale for laws, regulations, rules, and policies should be just. The second, the process itself should be just. So social justice addresses equity issues as well. So sometimes we find examples where policies for employees are developed for those employees, say for employees who are, for example, like from different ethnicities. So if we are developing policies, sometimes we find that that ethnic group is not represented in decision making. So there are many examples. Actually, my students keep sharing some examples with me. A student shared very recently, a student who is from Afghanistan shared an example that some policies were developed in his organization in Afghanistan, where it was about women, and all men were making that policy for women. So that is again against the spirit of procedural justice. So procedural justice significantly shapes students' trust in academia as well as their behaviors. I would like you to just note this, the second research, which says that students place more value on fair decision-making procedures, such as the opportunity to speak and appeal, be treated in a neutral and respectful way, and so forth. Then on distributive fairness, the grades they receive and other decisions affecting them. Procedural justice is day-to-day thing. It is a procedure. It is a way we achieve something. So it is more visible. Outcomes are also visible, but actually outcomes are underpinned by a number of procedures, and these procedures need to be just. Equality and justice, they go hand in hand. So EDI, equality, diversity, and inclusion, they are, we see that because key role of just procedures is, we recognize the key role of just procedures and outcomes. So many educational institutions all over the world have developed policies which are known as EDI policies. So equality is about ensuring that everyone has the same opportunities and no one is treated differently or discriminated. You all know that thing. And move to diversity, that is recognizing, respecting, and celebrating differences. The most important thing here is celebrating differences. Sometimes we say that, well, we recognize diversity and we respect diversity. But the important thing is that we need to celebrate diversity. We need to believe that diversity is good. People who are diverse, whether diversity is in terms of ethnicities or social class or languages, diversity is good and we need to celebrate. Inclusion is about creating an environment where everyone feels welcome and valued. It is communicated through institutional culture. It is because it is part of the hidden curriculum and it is communicated through the institutional culture. The most important thing related to establishing inclusive practices is that this requires awareness of our own unconscious biases. Sometimes we have conscious biases, but many times we have unconscious biases. We think that, well, we are not biased, but there are some unconscious biases, and we need to be very, very reflective, and we need to be involved in introspection to see what are our unconscious biases. Maybe we are not unable to overcome those biases instantly, but we can always manage those biases, and there would be a time when we will be able to overcome those unconscious biases. So EDI, they are the important elements of like EDI, wider EDI policies of any institution. So why EDI practice is important and what EDI practice is about and why is it important? EDI practice deals with what is absent in terms of equality, diversity, and inclusion in any organization. In other words, EDI work or EDI practice addresses inequality and lack of diversity and inclusion. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Yeah. So EDI is a precondition to foster institutional justice and success for all individuals and the institution. So why inclusion? I want you to look at the pictures on the next slide and comment if the items in each picture are identical. So there is a set of pencils, there's a set of footballs, there's a set of paper clips, and then there's a set of boxes. All, do you think that all pencils are alike, all paper clips are alike, all footballs are alike, and these boxes are alike, identical or not? They are all man-made stuff. But can we expect that they are all identical? All pencils were alike, paper clips were alike. Can human beings be completely identical like man-made things? That is the question. We cannot have same expectation. Sometimes, like, what I feel is that when it is about physical differences, people do acknowledge that, people do accept that, and that's very great. For example, I worked in Beacon House National University in Pakistan, a very, very prestigious institution in Pakistan. And the good thing, which I always liked about Beacon working there, was that inclusion was there, diversity was there, and people accepted and celebrated that diversity as far as appearance was concerned. And that's always great. And I'm sure there are many institutions across the world, in Pakistan too, which all celebrate this diversity and they appreciate these visible differences. However, when it comes to intellect, when it comes to hidden things, I really don't know if we really celebrate that diversity also. If a person is tall or if a person is short, that is acceptable. But we expect that both think the same way. We expect similar choices from them. We expect, and sometimes when I used to work as a teacher in school, I still remember, and I feel very ashamed of that thing, that like I always expected that all my students should perform in the same way. I thought that, well, I was teaching in the same way, and I expected that whatever I was teaching should have been received in, in a very, very similar fashion, in a very identical fashion. Things don't happen in that way. We deal with humans. It was such a wrong expectation on my part. So we need to believe that human beings are different. They are not only physically different, they are intellectually different. They have different assumptions, they have different beliefs. We are all different, and we need to celebrate these differences. Here is a small task for you. I want you to go to menti.com. Here is the code. If you want to scan this QR code, you can scan that, and there is a small task for you. There are 5 questions. I want you to answer those questions. Give me a minute so that I just minimize it. And let me go.
I could not access the code Qudsia in the short time that it was on the screen, but I know that you have given the code on the top. Could we get the code? So if you go to mentimeter.com,
All right.
I cannot see the code either.
All
So
right.
that's why I think nobody
All
is
right.
able to access it.
Sorry for that.
Yeah.
Give me a minute so that I can fix the issue. Oh. I just removed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here it is.
So there it is. Okay, seems good. So if you go to www.menti.com and fill in the number, you will also get the same thing, the page for Mentimeter responses. That's a tough question. Do I really value EDI? Because we'll all say yes. So
It is a difficult question,
yeah,
definitely. It's just reflection. So if you
yeah,
think that you are addressing EDI, that's
yeah.
so good. So you should feel very good. You should be proud of yourself that you really value EDI. Yeah, this is just self-reflection.
That's right. So we cannot go on to the next question.
All
I have
right.
to take the first one.
All
Yeah.
right. So the next one is here.
Which workplace behaviors? Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I will share the results with you. In the first response, I can see 90% people said that they value EDI. That's really brilliant. I'm so happy to know that. 10% said that they are unsure, and no one said that they do not value EDI. This is really great. I'm so pleased to know that. Okay. So there are responses that which workplace behaviors indicate if people value EDI. So there are very interesting responses valuing difference, accommodating, openness, justice, clear operating procedures, inclusivity, empathy. Empathy is so important. That's
True.
really good. Brilliant.
We cannot
Openness.
see the slides for the Mentimeter cloud, I think that must be formed.
Yes, I'm going to share it here. You can
Okay.
see it here. So it is brilliant.
Yeah. Absolutely. Respect, empathy, these are
Brilliant.
yes.
All right. So let's move to the next one. Does my organization promote EDI? Oh, I hope that in future the organization where there is no EDI, they will be doing EDI. They will be engaged in EDI practice. So it's good that people believe that they are working in organizations which are promoting EDI. That's brilliant. So 19%. To some extent, it's again the first step. Hopefully, they will be doing more EDI practice in future. That's great. Not at all. So there are fewer organizations which are not engaging in EDI practice. Okay. So the next one, second last slide. So what do you think is the EDI, is not an EDI principle, celebrating diversity, promoting uniformity, creating equitable opportunities, and respecting everyone? So EDI promotes, celebrates diversity. It creates it focuses on equity and equality, creates equitable opportunities to achieve equality, and promotes respect for everyone. Yes, we shouldn't be expecting uniformity. We shouldn't believe that people, their behaviors are uniform or they should be thinking alike. So promoting uniformity is not a principle, is not an EDI principle. So the last slide. What can we do as individuals or groups to contribute towards EDI practice? We are organization, we are institutions. Institution is not only the leadership group. We all contribute towards institutional culture. So we are institution. So what can we do as individuals or groups to contribute towards EDI practices in our organizations? Respect, deference, brilliant. Behave responsibly, inclusive, adaptive, welcoming. That's so important that we behave respectfully. We allow participation. Great. Welcoming is so important because if you are not welcoming, this will not be helpful in building trust. And trust is the main element of procedural justice. and developing relationships. When we talk about practices, there are three elements of practices, which are saying, doings, and relatings. And relating aspect is so much important. So brilliant responses, pluralism, accept opinion, okay, agreeing, disagreeing, kindness, empathy, they are all, that's all brilliant. So you are already, it indicates that you are already engaged in EDI practice in some way or other. And it also indicates that you really value EDI. So thank you very much for participating in this activity. So here, let's go back to our slides. I will try to
Qudsia,
finish it in the next 5 minutes, or
no,
should I just
if you,
share?
if you could sort of go through the main slides, because Diana has to leave at 4, so just focus, if you don't mind, on some of the main slides.
Definitely. So I'm going to just share EDI strategy at the University of Dundee, where I work. So here, I'm myself part of the EDI network that has different representatives, and we have EDI committee, which ensures that our practices are inclusive and we promote diversity and inclusion. And there are 4 points of our EDI strategy, that is inclusive campus communities. When we say inclusive campus communities, means that people from diverse backgrounds, they are part of the bigger university community, and they have key role in different leadership positions. There is workforce diversity, a vibrant research culture and environment, equity in educational achievement and experience, ensuring a proactive, accountable educational approach, empowering every student to excel and thrive. So there is a special program for students who are like, because of their disadvantageous circumstances, if they are unable to cope with studies, or they are unable to get to certain level, academic achievement level. So university has a special program for them, so that those students can be empowered and they can perform at that level. So there are different measures which are part of the University of Dundee's EDI strategy. And this is the last, not the last one. Sorry. So these are the some elements of inclusive leadership. So inclusive leadership it includes all those elements which we have already discussed. I have included this picture from a research which involved, this was actually literature review of literature on inclusive leadership. And the good thing to note is that whatever you mentioned on your responses on Mentimeter activity, all this has been reported in literature too. So I'm not going to discuss it further, because this is all what you have already mentioned. All right. So transparent policies and practices. It is so important that your students' admission policy fee policy, assessment policy, appeals policy, staff recruitment policy, promotion policy, leave policy, staff pay scale, access to information policy, all these policies are transparent. And the question is, are all organization policies publicly available? So one of the practices towards procedural justice is that we make our things transparent and make them available to public, so that there is no hidden agenda. So this is part of procedural justice. People will trust what you are saying if you make these things available. So similarly, there should be EDI-focused professional development, sometimes people don't behave, which are, I would say that, which are not pro-EDI. The reason is not that they do not value EDI. The reason is that they do not have professional training on this thing. I really appreciate this webinar series. It is all about inclusion and EDI training. This is a very good initiative. And I'm sure people who have attended all the sessions would have developed a better understanding of EDI. And it is important that organizations, they provide mandatory training, mandatory EDI training to their staff and students alike. For example, at the University of Dundee, when I joined the University of Dundee in 2022, I completed EDI training. It was a mandatory training which I had to do like all other people. So it is important that that organizations provide opportunities for staff development related to EDI understanding. So the last one, this last slide is that creating an inclusive learning environment, that we need to create inclusive learning environment, including diverse perspectives in curriculum also, creating opportunities to empower marginalized voices, providing access to integrated services such as counseling, health services, academic support to address the holistic needs of students, promoting the use of inclusive language. So these are some educational practices which are equitable educational practices. So thank you very much. I stop here now. Thank you very much.
But many of you who have missed Qudsia, we made Qudsia jump through some slides. You will all get it. So we'll share the slides so you can always access the resources. And like I said, last but not the least, Diana, what an honor to have you. And I am actually, since I wasn't aware, I've been out of reading a lot, and your framework keeps coming up. And there's some colleague of ours also on FCC that says I'm using her framework for my PhD. So there's so many people who are thrilled to see you. Such a remarkable name in our midst. Thank you so much. If I may just quickly go on, as you can see, we had 2,810 registrations who will all get the materials, 157 from our campus, but mostly from outside. Even now, I do see that the series participation has dropped. I think the gap that came, because every day they were on top and they were like 450, 400. One day we exceeded 500, and the gap, I think, sort of beat that. Otherwise, there would have been more, I'm sure, with every passing day. Diana, you are a professor emeritus of learning with digital technology at the University College London, Knowledge Lab, University College London, UK. You are head of the e-learning strategy unit, Department of Education, Pro Vice Chancellor, Learning Technology and Teaching, Open University. I tell lots of faculty who can't go abroad to avail the services of the Open University. It's one of the best open source universities, I think, in the world. You also supervise educational technology students, and I am sure your researches are remarkable with groundbreaking frameworks or innovative contributions that you bring, realizing the potential of digital technology for scaling in higher education, scaling up future education, learning designer app. You also have an app to your name. Wow. Then, of course, you lead blended and online learning design and future learn, and you have books, Rethinking University Teaching. That is a topic perhaps we should talk more about. So mark my words, if you are okay with this, we'll reach out again for some of those. Rethinking University Teaching, and would love to have a discussion around that, especially in the light of AI now. I think it would be interesting. Teaching as a design science and online learning futures. So an evidence-based vision for global professional collaboration on sustainability. Wow. So very, very happy to have you with us. So over to you without much ado, because your time is limited.
Thank you so much, Ruxana, and for your very kind invitation to join you in this very exciting series of seminars. I'm very impressed that you've been able to gather so many people to do this. And I hope you can now see my slides. Oh dear, now I've just destroyed it. Where's it gone? Okay, you can see my slides and I've just lost my view.
Yeah.
Oh, I was trying to get rid of the chat and I hit the wrong thing.
Okay, no, but we can see your slides right there.
But I can't see them.
You can't. Yeah. So maybe there's some.
Now I can. Sorry.
Okay.
All is fine. All is fine.
Great.
Okay, so I was thanking you for this kind invitation, and I've called it enabling every student to reach their learning potential, because I think that is what inclusivity essentially is about. Students will not all do the same things. They won't reach the same potential, but each can develop as far as they possibly can. And what I'm going to try and outline is the way in which digital technologies can promote and also measure the kind of inclusive teaching in line with your ambitions here. Now, I'm sorry, I have a very bad throat today, so I may have to pause and take medicine from time to time, but let's see if I can keep it going. So the outline of this session is to think, first of all, about why is inclusivity important, and everything that both you and Qudsia have said today is about exactly that on the very large scale. I'm coming down to the perspective of the individual teacher. What can we as individual professionals do to understand the different types of exclusion there already are in our systems? And then if we want to include those people, we have to think in terms of what are we trying to help them do? So the different types of teaching and learning activities I want to go through in terms of how can we help to improve inclusivity with respect to each of those. And obviously, how can technology support each of those different kinds of inclusion? Measuring impact is one of the things that you've mentioned as being so important, and that's absolutely right, because we can measure impact in quite different ways, and looking at the digital methods for doing that is going to be valuable. And finally, I want to think about how we as a profession can come together to collaborate, to innovate in these kinds of areas. Then, of course, I look forward to the discussion. Now, we've been talking about university level approaches to this, and sorry. I'll try and speak at a different register and see if that helps. And of course, if you look at university mission statements, we have very ambitious missions. I looked at the FCCU motto, by love, serve one another, very appropriate. And you say quite specifically that you want to develop informed, ethical, and responsible citizens. And that's so important that our students come out understanding the nature of EDI and what they can do. If you look at what universities, world-class universities like Oxford, are saying, they are committed to equality of opportunity, to engendering inclusivity. Quite specifically, a very elite university claims to be doing that. My own University College London, talks about changing the world for the better and for the long-term benefit of humanity. So we make these commitments, but quite honestly, when we look at what we actually do, we can't always see that inclusivity in practice. So it's our duty as academics in these universities to make sure that we are attempting to address those missions. But how do we develop that in practice? We have to be aware of the different types of exclusion there are, and I think you've already talked, both Ruxana and Qudsia, about the different types of exclusion. I've sorted them into 4 basic areas of gender, social and cultural differences, physical disabilities, and mental and cognitive disabilities, and then looked at the different kinds of aspects of those within each one of those. And especially we've already mentioned differences in women's roles, social and cultural differences in terms of ethnicity and language, but also, of course, economic inequalities, which may sometimes mean that people don't have access to digital methods, but would also mean they don't necessarily have access to traditional education either. So poor access to either technology or education can be a result of those social and cultural differences. Physical disabilities, the full range, and mental and cognitive disabilities, again, the full range, both emotional and cognitive needs. So let's see what we can look at now to consider how the different types of teaching and learning activities that we're using link to those different types of disabilities and lack of inclusion, and what we can do in terms of each of those different types of teaching and learning activities to address those forms of inequality. And I start necessarily from the conversational framework because it's something that I developed some time ago to try to see how we can express all of the things that the main theories of teaching and learning are telling us, but in a framework that makes it relatively straightforward for a teacher to think about. How can I help my students learn? What does it take to learn? And how can I help them? And so it expresses the teaching and learning process as this series of iterative exchanges between the learner and the teacher. The teacher may not be just a person, it may be a book or all sorts of things. Between a learner and their peers, other students, and at two levels of the way they're conceptualizing ideas and the way they're putting those ideas into practice, concepts and practices. And this, because it comes from the history of educational research on how people learn at all levels, it applies to all levels, right through from primary to professional education in any subject area and in any mode of learning. So the framework shows how each of those 6 types of learning are a distinctive way for the teacher to promote recurring cycles of concept and skill development through learning through acquisition, which is reading, watching, or listening to a teacher or watching a presentation, anything that helps them change and develop their concepts. But the other learning types are all different because they all involve deliberate activity by the learner. They're all types of active learning. So there's learning through inquiry, for example, where the student is going to the source of their knowledge and investigating it, asking questions of it. There's learning through practice, where the teacher sets up a learning environment. It sets goals for the student. They try things out, they get feedback, and then they will have to engage with the concept sometimes in order to be able to improve their practice. So that's a very involved and elaborate process of learning with all of those cycles returning consistently so that the learner is able to practice both concepts and their use in practice. Learning through discussion means learning with other students, challenging each other, negotiating ideas, explaining things to each other, or even asking questions of the teacher. Learning through collaboration is when they're practicing for themselves, but also sharing their practice and discussing it with other students. So then finally, learning through production is where they bring all that together. What have I learned? What are the concepts and practices I've learned? How do they meld with each other? And how do I express that in terms of what I've learned? So what we try to do as teachers is to keep all those cycles moving, because that's what this central learner, developing concepts, developing practice, and developing the relations between them, is trying to do. So we can represent the wide range of methods that we all use in our conventional teaching and learning, where learning through acquisition is done through teacher presentations or students reading. Inquiry, we send them to the library. With practice, we have labs, exercises, that sort of thing. And with discussion, we set up discussion groups amongst students. For collaboration, we give them group projects. And for learning through production, we ask them to write something, to submit an assignment or something of that kind. Everyone will be familiar with all those, and most teachers use most of those in their normal teaching. But now we have the opportunity to use digital methods to support learning. And that's what we explicitly want to do here, is to think about how digital methods can support inclusion. So if we think about each of those types of inclusion that we want to achieve, thinking about gender and the problems that women have, or transgender discrimination can affect people, safe spaces can be provided digitally online in a way that physical spaces very often can be very challenging. Social and cultural differences. Ethnicity and countering racism is one aspect, but look at how important language is. In digital methods, we can use auto-translation, as well as the flexible locations that can reach people who otherwise would not be able to reach education. Physical disabilities. There are many types of assistive technology which can interpret sound and visuals, for example, for people with hearing or sight disabilities. Mobility for travel, for people reading, writing, those who have dyspraxia. Digital tools, again, can improve that kind of interface. The energy for sustained concentration. If you're disabled in any way, then having the energy to do things at the pace of everyone else can be so difficult. So flexible, asynchronous interactions provided by digital technology are very important. Mental disabilities, again, access to online support groups can be very important for emotional needs, cognitive needs, personalized interaction with meaningful feedback on an individual basis to the learner. The ones I've put in bold are the ones I'm going to focus on particularly, and of course there are many more, but just to give an idea of what we can do. So in relation to each of the 6 types of learning we want to engage students in, we have this research-derived framework that helps teachers adapt conventional learning experiences to make the best use of digital opportunities for all types of students, and that's what I want to go through now. So just thinking about learning through acquisition, reading, watching, listening, and then for all the active and social learning types, we can go through each one to see how digital technologies could help with inclusion. Assistive technology for interpreting text and visuals, for example, for learning through reading or watching, digital media support for presentation of ideas and information for students. Very important to use things like digital textbooks. Cortex is one example of that, because they can help students with poor eyesight. They can convert text to speech. They can translate text into many different languages. They can change font styles to help students. Line spacing, alternative text for images supplied by the publisher very often, and offering keyboard-only input for selecting functionalities. So many ways in which digital textbooks can be much more inclusive than traditional ones. Expert podcasts, there's one called the Pakistan Experience. Now, podcasts are a wonderful way to present to hearing people the things which they're not able to see when they're watching videos. On the other hand, video animations can be enormously valuable. This is one where the alt text is describing it as an animation showing a cell with chromosomes splitting into 2 daughter cells, each with the same number of chromosomes. So you can read that, but if you can see, you can also watch what is happening. And that kind of representation of ideas can be very important for people. So learning through acquisition, reading, watching, and listening, that's the way in which we expect to be able to use all kinds of communication, assistive technologies to help with students doing those activities. Then for learning through inquiry or investigation, being able to explore other ways of representing an idea. And for this one, I've taken the idea which comes from physics of how the water cycle works. Now, maybe a student has not had time or has not fully understood what's going on for the teacher. They can do their own search. Now, if you're doing a search online for support for your learning, you need Google Translate. So if you're able to get automatic translation of all these different ways of explaining the same concept, that's so important. So let's just take this particular explanation. If I've got Google Translate embedded, I can interpret that in a language that I can understand. Now, honestly, I can't understand that language, but many people can. So auto-translation is essential for broadening access. So how do digital media help with inquiry learning? Students are asking questions of the site, the website, the teacher, the book, whatever it is, and they're getting something back. So those continued iterations help them develop their conceptual understanding, and those repeated cycles are what helps them do that. Now let's look at learning through discussion. And here, as I mentioned, flexible, asynchronous interactions where the student can do things in their own time. Now, we've already seen the value of Mentimeter when the previous speaker was asking us to respond to Menti. Well, you can ask all students to respond to your questions. And very often, if a teacher is asking for student questions in a class, then they get maybe 3 or 4 questions. But here, every student can say something. And those answers are recorded, what they're saying, and you can look through them later on. So the whole class can see what each other has said, and the student who is slow to write or anxious about thinking and expressing themselves can be quite anonymous, but they can nonetheless also join in that process of presenting their ideas. So whether they're discussing it at the time or later after the class, that's a very valuable way for including everybody. So with discussion learning, that iterative discussion between students and other students, and of course, students and teachers, and the teacher may also be included in that discussion, can be so important for them. Then we come to thinking about learning through practice and personalized interaction with some kind of digital model. Now, I've chosen one here from science, which shows how students can interact with a model of an energy system. And they can decide on the parameters inputting to that system in order to achieve a particular value of the water temperature here. Now, if they're trying to get a particular temperature of, let's say, 100 degrees, they've got to put so much energy in. So they put some in, they run the model, and it gets up to 50 degrees. Nobody has to tell them they're wrong. The student themselves can see they haven't managed that. So they put a lot more energy in, and now it goes up to 200. And they still haven't made it correct. So now they've got to go back again until they've understood the combination of energy parameters that achieves the outcome they want to achieve. And in that process, nobody has had to interpret for them what the right answer is or whether they've got it wrong and what they should do. They can see for themselves from that model the way in which they can improve their own practice and so achieve a better understanding of the system. So that's what we call meaningful feedback, which is what students need. But it's personalized to that individual student as well. And that student can take as long as they like to run that model, whether it's an energy model from science or whether it's something like a translation in terms of language, and they can keep trying translations and they can see how it turns out and how accurate it is. Or they can do dialogic practice with an AI chatbot until they get the exercise exactly right. Many ways in which digital models can help a student understand how to learn both concepts and practice. Where we can see it represented on the diagram here of the model generates a goal for the student. They try an input, they get feedback, not quite right, so they try again. And they still haven't got it right, so now they've got to think about it. So how do I do this to get this accurate? So that learning through practice involves cycles of both conceptual and practice understanding. Then learning through collaboration. And here I've picked out using something like Padlet walls, because the Padlet wall is a nice way to get students to collaborate. They can share ideas together. They can comment on each other's ideas. And this is a page from a local council in the UK, which is offering all sorts of different Padlet walls where you can go to discuss things concerning you. And I notice there's one here on exam stress, for example. So if you join that Padlet, you're joining a community of students sharing ideas, sharing ways of coping with exams, sharing each other's solutions. So again, that's a way of thinking about how students can help each other with their own practices, sharing practices, learning from each other's practices and discussing them. And that collaboration is more than mere discussion because they're actually sharing their practices as well. So it's an important addition to learning through discussion, which we can see if we represent that on the framework. The learning environment is now a Padlet wall or a succession of Padlet walls. Students are contributing to that, discovering what their own solutions are, and then sharing that, discussing it with other students, and sharing their practice as well. So learning through collaboration is an elaborate process that engages the student in all these different ways. And then finally, learning through production is where we assess students. They have to produce something that represents what they've learned. What I'm showing here is a way in which a teacher was asking their students to represent what they've learned about sacred buildings. What are the properties? What are the features of sacred buildings? And students are asked to express that through using PowerPoint. And they can create diagrams or they could create animations. And that process of creativity draws on everything they've been learning and shows what they've been able to learn. And again, the assistive technologies can help with speech to text and text to speech and large fonts and alt text and so on to help them in what they're producing in different ways. And again, because it's personalized and individual, the students can take their own time and then learn from each other as they share those ideas. So learning through production is drawing together the iterations around practice and concepts, putting it together and presenting something to the teacher, in this case, using the learning environment offered by something like PowerPoint. And then, of course, the teacher provides feedback on that, which will help them reflect on what they've produced. So how do technologies help with all these different ways of doing things? Speech to text and text to speech can help some kinds of students. In learning through inquiry, exploring the internet, but using Google Translate or other forms of assistive technology. In learning through practice, using a digital model with feedback which is in their own time and in their own format for output. Text chat can help with discussion groups. Sharing ideas on Padlet can help with collaboration. And PowerPoint can help students express ideas in the way that they generate their assignment to the teacher. So with digital and online technologies, we have a huge new array of intriguing ways of supporting these different types of learning. And if you're familiar with any of the things, the tools, the assistive technologies, which are important for students with different kinds of disability or different kinds of learning needs, then these are the ways we have to incorporate them to help them learn. Excuse me. Now, coming to measuring impact, two basic types of impact we can look at, quantitative and qualitative. Where quantitative is the numbers of students doing things or the numbers of things they do. Qualitative is the way they express what they know. And quantitative, well, every time a student is using a virtual learning platform or any kind of device, then the data can be collected by the teacher, and the data on any interactions they're using with any apps can also be recorded. And survey data, which you generate yourself on student ratings of the elements of your teaching, are very valuable feedback on what kind of impact your teaching is having on them. Things like in-class answers to quiz questions, where you see the answer that everybody can give, as in Menti, as opposed to just asking the questions verbally. And of course, multiple choice questions, quizzes of that kind, can help you see to what extent students are understanding what you're saying as you go. Just one simple question can give you a sense of how far the students are following what you're doing. With qualitative data, student outputs in apps, if they're creating text, if they're designing an object, if they're making an animation, if they're doing something with a digital model, you can record that and see what they're doing. A survey on their experiences of aspects of teaching asks an open-ended question. They describe how they're evaluating it and experiencing. In-class questions, the contribution to Menti and Google Doc and things of that kind, you collect any kind of contribution that the student wants to be able to make. It could be a word cloud, as we experienced just earlier. And that tells you something about what the class is thinking. Then I've mentioned concealed multiple choice questions because this is a very much more valuable way of doing multiple choice, where you simply ask an open-ended question first and then put the choices to students. So they begin by thinking about what they know as their answer to this question. They express that in text, and then you give them the choices, and they hopefully look for the one that came closest to what they just wrote. If you omit that part, you don't really know what they're thinking. You know which one they've guessed at or which one they've chosen, but you don't really know what they're thinking. If you ask first, what do you think the answer to this question is? Then you can record that and you can see all the different ways in which they've answered that question, as well as getting numerical data about how many answered it correctly from the quiz. Then, of course, with qualitative data, there's a lot of analysis to do, and we will now be beginning to use AI-based analysis of student text according to the rubric that you give the AI chatbot or whatever it is that's doing the analysis. And you can get some help with doing that. So this is going to be a very interesting new way for getting measures of the impact that we're having on our students. So now I want to move on to how we work together on this, because there's a lot of innovation to do. There's a lot of exploration to do on understanding how we can help students, especially those with different kinds of exclusion problems, to overcome these through the use of technology. And by using large-scale online platforms like this is an example of a course which is running on FutureLearn at the moment on blended and online learning design. It's where teachers come together from all sectors of education to learn about things like the conversational framework and what you can do in your teaching and learning, and also to share their ideas, because it's not just a course, it's where professionals are sharing ideas. And that link to it I'll put up later as well. So we've got tens of thousands of teachers on this now who are sharing those ideas. This is the kind of thing we can do. We can share video case studies from whatever the target audience is. And in this case, we have videos from primary through to university education. Research findings can be articulated, and then you can have activities for the participants to engage in with respect to those research findings. Discussion and contributions from all of the participants who are very knowledgeable people. And teachers love sharing what they've tried out with their students and sharing that with each other. So it becomes what I would call community knowledge building. And we need to do a lot of that because there's so much to find out. This is one example of an activity in the third week where we call it collaborative knowledge building, where we're asking people to create a learning design and then contribute that design to the community. Then you look at what other people have also designed according to the same rubric. It might be, for example, show a learning design for helping students understand a difficult idea or concept, something like that. So now the website asks each person who submitted the design to review 2 others and then to reflect on the feedback that you get from those 2 other people. So that's a very collaborative process for teachers designing together, building on what each other has done. We collect the designs, and this is an example of the different kinds of things that people have done on the course. Quite a range of different subject areas relating to infographics, an ESL class, English as a second language class, purposive communication, linear and binary researchers, all kinds of things people come up with. And that's how we build new learning design knowledge together. So it's really trying to make sure that we can innovate together on the large scale. And to do that, to express those ideas, we use the Learning Designer, which is this free, open online design tool. And that helps with planning blended learning. It's based on the 6 learning types from the Conversational Framework. And it uses a design pane, screen for doing that. You can either adapt other people's designs from the browser that I mentioned, or create your own. You can analyze and review them and then share and publish them. So in this case, let's say we go to the browser and we're looking at the section on vocational education and training. And I'm going to look at something on sustainable development because I'm interested in that. And I get up this design for learning about emissions and climate change. The teacher who designed this has expressed all these different aspects of it. It takes an hour and a half. It's a description on how carbon affects our own region and affects the planet. It expresses the aims of the idea, and then it's also you can expand this on this page to see what the learning outcomes are. I've edited this so that I can make sure that everything fits on the screen, but this comes from someone else. And they're thinking about the carbon emissions. You can see here it's split into 3 different parts, thinking about carbon emissions at home on your own, then doing it together in class, and then after class. So if we can see here that this records the amount of time they spend, how many students in the group. Here it's just working at home, so it's just 1. Are they online? Yes, they are. Is the teacher present? No, no teacher, but here the teacher is present because they're in class. This activity is taking 15 minutes and 10 minutes and so on, and then after class, they can do something else with it. And the program is looking at how long they spend in each of these different types of learning, and we can see it collected here all together. I got a lot of learning through acquisition and a lot of learning through discussion, and some through collaboration and some through inquiry. If I go into edit mode, then I can borrow this to change it any way I like. And in this case, I've changed this activity down here. So if I just go back to the previous one, you can see that I had no practice here. There's no purple for practice. I've just got discussions going on. But I've decided that in mine, I'm going to turn that into a practice session. So I've created this practice session. And now I've got a slightly more varied series of activities going on. So that's the kind of way in which you can interact with what other people have done and create your own. And that shows you the whole thing in a bit more detail. You can see these color codings of the different activities down the side. Then you can analyze your design by going to the Analysis tab. Here it shows the original design, and there it shows the one I've changed to. The proportion of face-to-face and online is the same. The proportion of teacher presence is the same. The asynchronous and synchronous learning is the same. But I've included more individual learning, because if I want to make it more oriented towards people who need disability support of various kinds, then I'm more likely to include individual learning. And I can see that I've got a bit less group learning, or I might reduce the whole class learning. I mean, it allows you to analyze what you've done and decide what you want to do about that. Maybe it's enough. Maybe you're fine with it. It's entirely up to you. There are no rules. So then we go back to looking at sharing learning designs and redesigns on the website, and using something like a course in which we use that tool as part of the course to share ideas with each other. And this is what we mean by quality education. I think Qudsia already referred to quality education, and this is how we reach everyone in the world. And when you think of the the goal, the SDG 4, is every child should have access to a basic education, and that's still millions of children in the world yet to reach, and therefore millions of teachers to be able to help them. So quality education becomes, in many ways, the most important of the SDGs because it contributes to all the others as well. It contributes to professional learning. And that SDG 4 aim for universal access to lifelong learning is precisely what we can do with these kinds of professional development courses that we're doing here for teachers, but for training in any professional area. Okay, so coming back to the ways in which technology supports inclusion, we've looked at, particularly at translation, at assistive technologies, flexible asynchronous interactions, online support for emotional needs, and personalized interactions. So coming back to the original title, enabling every student to reach their learning potential, that's what this is about. And the idea of the conversational framework and looking at digital methods for inclusion using that, and then using these techniques like the Learning Designer or joining the BOLD course, that's blended and online learning design. Those are ways in which we can do this together. And I think we need help from each other. It's very difficult. This is a recent book coming out in paperback next month, Online Learning Futures, which describes a lot of this, if that's of interest. But so my question to you now, and I hope we have time for discussion, is could this approach help teachers to make the best use of digital opportunities to truly enable every student to reach their learning potential? So thank you. I hope we have enough time to discuss that.
Thank you so much, Diana. Most of us do in-person teaching and are used to in-person modalities in our country. There's, I think, only one university, university that does it in Islamabad. We are starting, but we are not starting courses as such, like these are just webinars online. So what I have learned from is a lot more, that how we talk of the digital divide for other reasons, the lack of access to hardware, the lack of access to internet, the lack of access to people helping you with digital technology, because that's an area that's not much developed in our part of the world. But I can see how that divide in the classroom comes together, becomes much smaller with digital technology. That's a point well taken. But already you will see there are questions coming up in the chat about how do you do the difference when the tool is not there, when the internet is not there, when the technology resources. And that's the catch for Global South and many countries like us. But I do really see we are starting to use it. COVID helped us, a lot of us, because COVID, we were forced to go online. And now what we do, we call it more like a blended model of synchronous, asynchronous. There are chats, there are WhatsApp groups. Somebody is floating a WhatsApp group from another university. Well, that's a very good way of an online modality of access, collaboration, participation, so on. So there are some of those things that we have still retained for teaching. And so I've learned a lot, your idea of measuring. I really was enthralled, excited to see this learning design, how you vary it across different modalities of learning possibilities that happen and how you can measure the impact. And most important, I think, when we do credit courses, in our university, we were struggling with time on task. And here in the digital mode, you get the time on the task right there.
Yeah,
you don't have to do any assumptions and practice. So I will cut this and ask Fatima to first please take on questions that are directly for Diana. And I will hope Qudsia can stay on if questions are not answered for some of the questions that are directed towards her. So, Diana, over to you, and Fatima, please, if you could start.
Diana, this question is from Ravina Mali, and she's asking, in what ways can digital media be used to enhance inclusivity and increase diverse representation in decision-making processes?
In the decision-making processes, they take place among academics at different levels within the university. So they'll be all the way from the senior team at the top to the way in which a program team or a group of teachers are planning a course. And in all of those ways, you want to have, I mean, first of all, they have to have inclusivity among themselves and diversity of representation among themselves. So the first thing, and there's nothing that digital can do about this, is to make sure that on the senior team, in the program team, you have people who are thinking about diversity, people who are thinking about inclusion. And not everybody automatically thinks about it. So there has to be someone who has responsibility for that. And that's why I put a question to Qudsia, actually, about at her university, for example, is there someone on the senior team who has in their portfolio responsibility for DEI? Because it all starts at the top. No matter what individual teachers may do themselves, and it's important that we all individually do it, as an institution, we need to be aware because there are some things you can only do at that level. So the digital role in decision making is only really to bring more people into the discussion. So what you can do is make sure that, for example, in a university or even in a school, you have what we sometimes call a vertical representation of decision making. So you have representation right from the top to the assistant teachers, and even for some kinds of decision making, you have the cleaning staff or the catering staff involved as well, because it's about physical space, for example. Now, you will never have all of those people around a meeting table making decisions, but you can have them online. You can have them contributing. So I think digital methods for those sort of much more cross-sectional, inclusive discussions of decision-making are very important. It's a little like having citizen scientists. Are you familiar with the idea of citizen science?
No.
It's where you recruit people, anybody, to help with the collection of data to make scientific decisions or understand what's happening in the community or something like that. And so you train them in what it means to collect this kind of data, whether it's doing surveys of people or it's measuring water pollution or whatever it is. And just train them in that. And then you've got hundreds of people potentially in a region or in an area or just in a small community being citizen scientists. That's a form of decision making. That's a form of inclusion of people who can help to make these kinds of decisions. So I think the best way I can address that question is to say it's the way in which digital communication helps us. If you've just got a mobile phone, you can be joining in this very discussion wherever you are in the world. And one of the things that we've discovered with working with refugee populations and migrant populations, for example, is that for so many people in the world, the digital space is the only reliable space they have. Their physical space has been destroyed. They've had to move away for whatever reason or go somewhere else. What they have is their digital space. So it is very important to understand how we can use that for many kinds of decision making. I don't know what the question had in mind, but let's think about how we can use that more.
Thank you, Diana. Our next question is from Khalid Mahmood from Pakistan Institute of Fashion and Design. And the question is, with Sweden's recent shift back to traditional textbooks over digital tools, how can we find the right balance between online and offline methods to support effective and equitable learning experience?
Well, my only answer to that can be through experimentation. I think we have to find out. There aren't rules about this. Nobody can say the best possible balance is 50% of this and 50% of that. We don't know. It's going to depend on the context, on the kinds of students you have, on what kind of access they have to physical and digital methods. And the important thing for us as institutions and as professionals is to be flexible where we can be. Flexibility can be costly, so we can't be infinitely flexible. But we have to be as flexible as we can and take as much advantage as we can of the different flexibility and inclusion opportunities that digital methods give us. And then we experiment and we listen to what the students are saying. So another thing that digital methods give us in terms of communication is the opportunity to listen to our students. Ask them, how was this for you? And one of the things we use the Learning Designer for example, is that when we've designed a session, each of those panels of the different parts of the session, underneath each one is a little notes section. Now, we can, at the end of a session, we can give that representation to the students and say, would you like to comment on each stage of that learning design? How was it for you? It's much more precise than questionnaires usually are to students, which say, rate on a 1 to 5 scale this, and this thing that I've thought about. We're asking students quite openly, this is what I asked you to do for that half hour. How did that work out for you? And they can tell you, they've just experienced it, and they will tell you a lot. So engaging student comment, engaging students' ideas, needs, ways of thinking and experiencing. Digital methods give us access to that. And I think that's one of the best things we can do with it, is to listen.
Building on this discussion, Diana, our next question is from Sana Khan, as well as Sadaf Bashir from Shahid Benazir Bhutto University, asking what are the risks of increasing dependence on digital tools for students with limited digital access? Do you think that it impacts students' critical thinking skills and you can observe a decreased confidence in their own abilities?
We have to learn how to teach students to use digital methods. And digital methods can be confidence building. One of the things that I remember most from my work at the Open University in the UK is interviewing students and surveying students about their experience of learning online. And I'll just quote two very telling comments that students made. One said, when I'm online, I'm not in poverty. And that's an extraordinary notion. An open university is reaching people in all kinds of places. But they're all equal in the way in which they're represented in this online space. Another person said, when I'm online, people treat me like an adult. And I found this very strange until I looked more into who she was and a bit more about her. And she was an adult who was 4 feet tall. Feet, do you understand feet? Am I using universal measurements? But she was she was the height of most children. So when she was in a physical space, people would very often react to her as if she was more like a child than an adult. So those are the ways in which digital methods can increase your confidence. Or you're the kind of student who doesn't want to ask a question in a class, who doesn't want to respond to the teacher. But if they have their own mentee access to saying something in response to what the teacher has said, and it's anonymous, then they'll respond. And what's more, they find out that other people react to what they've said in that comment, and they like it, or they engage with it, or they find it surprising. So that builds their confidence for then being able to do those things in a real communicative, normal environment. So yes, lack of digital access is a big problem. And there's not much that the digital world can do about that. Technology companies are working very, very hard to make sure that every single individual on the planet has access to technology, and they will succeed in doing that long before we make sure that every child on the planet has a school round the corner. So we may as well embrace what digital can do, recognize those students who are unable to take advantage of it, and make provision for them. And there are many ways in which we can do that, but we must be aware of that problem. It's quite true.
I think which we forget, I think, and I'm sure Qudsia will have something to say, that even in our impoverished communities, perhaps in a way getting the infrastructure out of the way for schools and all that, travel for female teachers, which are the majority in schools.
Yes.
I think digital, technology is the way going forward if we can start investing in that. But somehow the idea of in-person schools still doesn't seem to, change. But I think it will have to, considering that degrees and micro-credentials are, one versus the other, and things seem to be changing. So I think there is a big shift. Qudsia, would you like to add something just in case? If you feel you have to add something to what Diana is saying, please do. We seem to have another 15
That's
minutes.
very important.
Yeah.
Yes, please do.
Fatma?
But we should have questions to Qudsia as well.
No, I
I'm
think
okay for time.
Your questions out of the way, and then Qudsia can comment on those so that we have her take as well. And then at 4, in another 15 minutes, if they're still left, then we'll go on to Qudsia to answer all those. I'm sorry. Gee, at some point we'll have to, try to finish it within 15 minutes. Gee, Fatma, if you could quickly go through some more questions together. Maybe state some together so that Diana could answer it in one go, 3, 4 questions.
Yeah. Mohammed Ali from Iringa International School is asking, which online learning apps do you recommend for all teachers to effectively enhance their teaching and support students' holistic success?
Well, you won't be surprised if I say the Learning Designer is the one that I would highly recommend. It has been very popular with teachers, actually. They kind of respond to it because there's nothing else quite like it. There are quite a lot of apps now that take you through a very kind of regimented way of preparing your learning design. But the Learning Designer is designed for teachers to think about their learning. And so the way in which you express your pedagogic ideas, the only constraint is that you have to say, is this activity about learning through acquisition or inquiry or practice and so on? That's the only constraint. It's entirely up to you how long they do it for, in what size of group they do it for, whether they're online or using something else, what kind of, you can attach any kind of tool or recommend they use a book and so on. And then it's entirely up to you what the sequence is and so on. But you can also make use of learning from what other teachers have done by looking at their designs, and then you make that your own. You edit it and you turn it into your own thing. So it's very flexible in that way. And then you can output what you've designed to something like Moodle. Do you use Moodle?
Yes.
Pakistan, yes. So you can output that to there, and then you have to edit it a bit in Moodle to make it work. But it started with what do teachers need, not with what can we tell them. So that's what I think makes it different and interesting for teachers. So of course I say that one. And then I think making the best use of whatever virtual learning environment you have for your students. And so many people use it as a way of saying, here's the reading list and here's what you have to do for the exam. And they don't use it in a very interesting way. But all of those platforms have the opportunity to set up student discussions, or to get students working in groups together, or to get students making presentations to each other or to the whole class online, which gives them a lot of digital practice. And that's a way in which they become both practiced at doing it, but they're also having to do a lot of active learning in that process. So my next recommendation would be make full use of all the capabilities of whatever learning platform you have in your university.
I'm not very sure if I may add that many universities are using learning management system. Many are, and many
Yeah.
have Blackboard, Canvas, and some of us have
Yes.
Moodle to go for this.
Yeah.
But I think if we did even a survey over here right now, yes, no, we'd be surprised if there's any option for that at their campuses.
Oh, really?
Those things are worrisome and need to be looked into.
They
Yeah.
should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Qudsia, we have a lot of questions for you, and the first one is actually from Diana. Diana, if you don't mind me stating the question, does a member of the senior team at Dundee have responsibility for EDI in their portfolio, and is it important?
All right. Okay. So thank you. Actually, when Diana mentioned this while answering another question, I quickly found a link of EDI strategy at the University of Dundee, and I have put that link in the chat box. So that actually details the whole EDI thing at the University of Dundee. So we have an EDI office, and then we have EDI networks in each school. And the EDI office or directorate is headed by a director who actually looks at the work of EDI committee and promotes the work of other EDI networks. So actually, University of Dundee is the first Scottish university which got Race Equality Charter Bronze Award in 2022. Now, other Scottish universities have also received that award. And we got three of our schools, I guess, they got Athena Swan Award as well. So we have recently, actually, I think a year ago, vice principal for equality was also appointed. So Professor Harry Handel is the vice principal for equality. And the other thing is that there is periodic equality impact assessment that is quite common in UK universities. So we also do quality impact assessment. I myself sit on equality EDI committee of my school, since I'm member race equality representative for my school. It's a huge school with more than 400 people. So we regularly meet. After every 6 weeks, we meet and we ensure that our work is quite aligned to the wider EDI strategy of the university. So yes, we have people, and I completely agree that if it's important that we work individually and we are engaged in EDI practices at individual level. But if we want to promote it at institutional level, then there should be some responsibility with the leadership group.
Yeah, it's a very good answer. And I've got the link now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Qudsia, in reference to what you have just said, what are some of the practical steps that organizations can take to ensure their EDI commitments go beyond written policies and are truly embedded into everyday culture and behavior of the institution? And this question is from Anil Ruhail from University of Sindh.
All right. So thank you. That's a very important question. Thank you for that. So yeah, as I mentioned, one of the practice is that we engage in equality impact assessment, and to get an idea what equality impact assessment is about, I can see that many, at least in the UK, many universities have uploaded their equality impact assessment forms on their websites. So you can get an idea of what are the indicators of equality impact assessment, and they can be modified definitely according to the local needs, because there is no universal way of looking at things. Although there are like HE Advanced in the UK has developed very sort of universal indicators. They are useful, but there is always a debate on that if those indicators capture the local needs or not. But yes, you can always get an idea about that. So I would say that equality impact assessment is important. The other thing which I would say is transparency. Whatever policies are developed at institutional level, they should be transparent. They should be publicly available. Because sometimes what I feel is that especially when I have experience of working in Pakistan and now in the UK. So I believe that I was very lucky. I worked in very good institutions in Pakistan. So there were very good policies. And whenever I asked my senior management people to share those policies with me, they shared that. But it should not be that individuals are asking them to share those policies. They need to be available publicly because every people like everyone doesn't have courage. Sometimes we are shy. We do not approach senior management people to share stuff with us. So uh, uh, policies should be made publicly available. And the other thing I would say is inclusive leadership. You all mentioned very relevant points in Mentimeter. You mentioned relevant points, and I shared a figure that was inclusive leadership and accountability is one of the ingredient of inclusive leadership. When we say accountability, where actually senior leadership is also accountable, and the other thing is distributed leadership. So inclusive leadership is important to promote EDI, where different voices are they where different voices are heard and included. So that is important. One more thing which I would say that while working in Pakistan, I found that there was a lot of consultation on different things, but it was not done formally. As a result, sometimes people like used to say that, well, we were not consulted because there was not formal way of consultation that you are given 1 month to respond or to give some ideas on some document. So I would suggest that there should be some formal consultation process when policies are being developed. So that really gives ownership to everyone also. Everyone feels that, well, we have contributed. Maybe people are not going to contribute. They just look at the document and think that, well, it looks fine. But at least everyone should be given an opportunity to contribute. So these are the few things which I would say that they might be helpful. Yeah.
There is a question for Diana, I see, Fatima, towards the very end. If you could go with that.
From Sana Khan, I think.
No, Osama Arshad from Government College University, Faisalabad. He says, what are the biggest barriers to accurately measuring the impact of digital learning tools in under-resourced educational environments? Would there be a difference? I think it would be nice to know. Diana, over to you.
Well, there is, of course. If you're under-resourced, you don't have the access to the more sophisticated tools that can really help you. So it takes more time, it takes more effort. You have to do more yourself if you have unsophisticated tools. So wherever we have under-resourcing, we as a teaching profession have to make that additional effort to counter it. But it doesn't mean that we ignore it altogether. We have to embrace it wherever we can have it and argue our case to the senior team, to the local authority, to the government, that this is very important and it's efficient when you put the infrastructure there. Teachers take it and they run with it. They really do. So it's enormously important that people who are making those top-level decisions about capital investment and infrastructure understand how valuable this can be to them. I'm afraid there's no easy answer, but you use what you have. You know, you are resourceful. And if you work in an under-resourced environment, you practice being resourceful anyway. Include digital technologies in that too. And there are such things as ways of having a piece of equipment which acts like a local community server, which can serve a local community, not just be used by one particular institution, even in the remotest places. So I think if we have to exercise our resourcefulness is the only answer. The digital doesn't provide the answer. It gets cheaper, never gets cheap enough. Okay, look, I'm so sorry. I think I now have to
yes, you
make
have
my
to
exit.
run. Yeah, how many questions are there, Fatima, left to go?
Is it
Sana, I think this is
possible?
all. We have a lot of similar questions, and I believe they have already been answered.
Okay.
Is it possible, Roxana, to record and keep the chat? Because there are many very useful comments in there.
Yes.
And I could always, go through them later and
Sort of, yeah.
send my answers.
Yeah. I think at this point, we will try to wind up the sessions. Are there any key questions that are still left, Fatima, if you think there's some that need to be?
All. I'll share the questions with Diane.
Okay, and
Thank you.
for
Thank you.
Qudsia, any
That's
for
great.
Qudsia?
Yeah, I'll share it with her.
Okay,
Yes, that's
so
lovely.
Qudsia, we'll
Thank
share
you.
it with you and we can send it to the registrants and the participants of
Mhm.
this group when we send out the emails with your resources. So we can add some answers and
Great.
questions at that time as a separate document. At this time, I'd just like to do a quick closing. I'm very, very thankful to you all for being here with us and to stick out with us for these 2 hours, and more than that, to our experts. The transformative professional deal session series are to a close, and now is the time to reflect and to practice on what we have learned to keep on learning. We have unpacked many layers of educational inequity and how they shape both student experience and the broader institutional culture. So our conversation has been around holistic student development. And to support that, we have to work at strategies at the class and course level, at the campus level, where governance, policies, systems all have to be tackled. And then we have to move beyond the campus to explore strategies in the real world. And that talks about campus community contact and many other options where you learn through experiential learning in the real environment. And so pedagogy, practice, curriculum, governance, those are all that are built in together. And they produce individuals that are not just academically sound, but they are wholesome individuals and are able to conduct responsibly in a globalized world. We are very happy that Diana weaved in digital innovation and global collaboration, not to widen divides, but to build it a more connected world. And so, as we conclude, we are reminded that equity is not a one-time intervention, nor a one-layer dimension, but an ongoing commitment. It calls for courage and commitment more than anything else to confront systemic barriers with purpose and integrity. And accountability, and how a matrix, measuring for the impact and making it sustainable is another dimension that cannot be forgotten. So with that, we call it to a close. We are very, very happy with the responses that we have had. And thank you, Diana. And Diana, I think, had to leave, so she has left. Thank you, Qudsia. And we are very, very thankful. But I do see the webinar results are resounding. 99% have learned, is the first question was 99, did you gain new knowledge? And 99%, that's remarkable. For me, a lot of it was new learning. So there is no, question about that. And again, a 95% who said that they find that they could take these ideas to apply to their context. So that's a good way to go and to end the session. We can share the results of the webinar. And lots of messages, Qudsia, were about lots of thanks and lots of that they were very remarkable sessions. And so there, Melanie, you can go back to your sleep times, but we'll miss you. Do keep in touch. And all of you have a very good coming summer where you reflect on your teaching and see if you can pick up 1 or 2 things that you can take to your classroom and context. That's more than enough. And it will make a big difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Qudsia. Joy to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.